This is the Global News Podcast from the BBC World Service. I'm Gareth Barlow, and in the early hours of Friday the 18th of June, these are our main stories. Barack Obama has said his Affordable Care Act is here to stay after the US Supreme Court dismissed the latest legal challenge by Republican-controlled states. One of the pioneers of Africa's struggle for independence, Zambia's founding president, Kenneth Kaunda, has died. And an international donor conference has been held in Paris to help the Lebanese army survive the country's economic crisis. Also in this podcast,
this ancient fish dates back 420 million years, evolving long before the dinosaurs and surviving the shifting of continents and the asteroid strike that wiped out much of life on Earth.
A new study has discovered that a rare deep-sea fish can live for up to 100 years, which is 5 times longer than previously thought. The US Supreme Court has upheld the law which aims to provide affordable health insurance for all Americans. The judges dismissed a legal challenge from Texas and 17 other Republican-governed states. This is the third time since 2010 that the Affordable Care Act, the signature policy of former President Barack Obama, has survived a challenge. The Speaker of the House of Representatives, the Democrat Nancy Pelosi, gave her reaction to the ruling.
We are, of course, happy with the Supreme Court decision on the Affordable Care Act. I think it's really important to note this historic decision. Today's Supreme Court decision is a landmark victory.
I heard more from the BBC's North American correspondent, David Willis.
This is the third time in just over a decade that the US Supreme Court, the highest court in the land here in the United States, has been called upon to consider a challenge to the Affordable Care Act. It's the third time the court has rejected such a challenge, added to which the majorities on the 9-member court are getting larger in its favour, despite Donald Trump having appointed more conservative judges. On this occasion, 7 of the 9 judges ruled in its favour. You may remember, of course, that Republicans also tried to overturn the law in Congress when they controlled both houses. Those efforts also failed. The upshot of all this is that it seems the Affordable Care Act is here to stay, despite the considerable opposition that Republicans continue to harbour for it.
What's been the reaction to this ruling? I see President Obama has released a statement.
He has indeed, and he weighed in on this, saying that the ruling reaffirmed that the Affordable Care Act was here to stay, as he put it. President Biden issued a statement as well. He called the ruling a major victory for all Americans benefiting from the law. And this is also, of course, Gareth, a victory for him personally, having made access to improved healthcare central to his agenda. And he has also promised to use his executive powers where he can to expand the provisions of the Affordable Care Act. He said today it's time to move forward and keep building on this landmark law.
And briefly then, what does that mean in practice for ordinary Americans?
Well, it means that they will continue, about 31 million Americans so far will continue to receive this cover provided under the Affordable Care Act. And the law basically gave millions of low-income Americans access to medical insurance by virtue of banning health insurance companies from denying coverage to those with so-called pre-existing conditions.
David Willis reporting there. One of the giants of Africa's liberation struggles, Kenneth Kaunda, has died in Zambia at the age of 97. He'd been admitted to hospital in Lusaka earlier this week, suffering from pneumonia. In the 1950s, Mr. Kaunda was a key figure in what was then Northern Rhodesia's independence movement from Britain. He became Zambia's first president in 1964 and led the country through decades of one-party rule. Mr. Kaunda was a strong supporter of efforts to end apartheid in South Africa. He was also a leading backer of liberation movements in Mozambique and what is now Zimbabwe. Patricia Golding, who was the BBC's correspondent in Zambia towards the end of President Kaunda's time in office, looks back at his life.
And now the new flag of Zambia has gone up.
The 24th of October 1964, and Zambia becomes the 9th African state to gain independence from Britain. The father of the new nation then, and for the next 27 years, was Kenneth Kaunda, whose name became almost interchangeable with that of the country.
People of Zambia, of all races,
and those who believe in and have a true friendship for our new state. Let us remember today our national motto: one Zambia, one nation. One Zambia, one nation.
Affectionately known as KK, he was a paternal figure, a vegetarian and a non-drinker. He was rarely seen without his familiar handkerchief and would openly cry when moved. The son of a Presbyterian minister and a teacher, he grew up with missionaries, and as the former Secretary-General of the Commonwealth, Sir Sonny Ramphal, recalls, religion imbued his entire life.
He was deeply religious, not only religious in a Christian way. He was open in an ecumenical way, even to Hinduism. That's part of what I describe as his goodness. And yet he was a hard-nosed politician.
Kenneth Kaunda entered politics in the early 1950s, one of a group of young African leaders who demanded complete independence from the colonial powers. After a spell in prison for subversion, he was elected president of the United National Independence Party, UNIP, which won the pre-independence general election and became the governing party. Tiende Pamodzi, Forward Together, the song that preceded most addresses by the president, who loved to sing. At first, Zambia did move forward. In 1964, it was one of Africa's more successful economies, supported by its huge copper reserves. Soon, the mines and many other companies were nationalised. The government provided free social services and subsidised food. But by the mid-1970s, these policies, combined with the world oil crisis and the falling price of copper, sent the Zambian economy on a downward spiral. Corruption, mismanagement, and a shortage of foreign currency to buy spare parts added to the problems. And Zambians also paid an economic price for their country's support of regional independence movements. The African National Congress had its headquarters in Lusaka, and the Zambian president's unstinting support.
You can count on Zambia in your long and bitter struggle to make South Africa a country that is not denied to any of its citizens.
Throughout his rule, Kenneth Kaunda played a major role in the fight against white minority rule across southern Africa. Opposition movements from what is now Zimbabwe, from Mozambique and Namibia also found refuge in Zambia. At Commonwealth meetings, Kenneth Kaunda was pivotal in promoting sanctions against South Africa. Visiting Lusaka shortly after his release from prison, Nelson Mandela thanked the Zambian people and appealed for their continuing support.
We are counting on your commitment to help us see the struggle through to its bitter end.
In 1972, Kenneth Kaunda had declared Zambia a one-party state. By the mid-1980s, his style was increasingly authoritarian. Newspapers were controlled, and he brooked little dissent. Further economic decline forced the government to take emergency financial measures. Food riots and an attempted coup followed. The mood had changed. The opposition was no longer afraid to speak out, and in 1990, Kenneth Kaunda was forced to reintroduce multi-party politics. In elections the following year, KK and UNIP were roundly defeated.
I tried to do my very best for Zambia. This is the nature of multi-party politics. You win some and you lose some elections.
By the end of Kenneth Kaunda's rule, people were tired of the rhetoric and the country was impoverished. Yet most Zambians remember KK with affection as the father of the nation. They recall the stand he took against white rule in Zambia and beyond, and note that he achieved his aim of a country not driven by ethnic differences. Truly, as he so often said,
One Zambia! One Zambia!
That report by Patricia Golding. The former president of Ivory Coast, Laurent Gbagbo, has returned home after nearly a decade overseas. During that time, he was tried and cleared of crimes against humanity over the violence following the election he lost in 2010. The BBC's Lala Sai in Abidjan was watching Mr. Gbagbo's arrival.
The plane arrived a little bit late, but when it arrived eventually, we could see Laurent Gbagbo getting down with the mask on. We could see that He's an older man now. He was walking slowly and being carried a little bit by people helping him around him. There was a crowd, but not as much as we expected, because in the morning, the people that wanted to go to the airport were stopped by the police. They were tear gassed, so they couldn't access the airport. But there were officials, MPs, and traditional chiefs.
Lalasai in Ivory Coast. There have been reports for some time that the leader of the northern Nigerian jihadist group Boko Haram was dead. Abubakar Shekau led thousands of fighters for more than a decade when a rival Islamic group claimed they had killed him in a battle a couple of weeks ago. Now a video has been circulated in which the militants admit their commander has died. The confirmation of Abubakar Shekau's death came as the President Muhammadu Buhari visited the northeastern city of Maiduguri and pledged to defeat the group.
The defense and security agencies should rest assured of the federal government's unalloyed commitment to winning the battle against terror and criminality. By pulling together the collective resources of the armed forces and other security agencies, we hope the enemy will now feel the ferocity of our firepower.
Nigeria is a mosaic of insecurity, with oil installations and their workers targeted in the southern Niger Delta, repeated high-profile attacks carried out on schools, as well as clashes between semi-nomadic herdsmen and farmers over land and resources. But it's the scourge of Boko Haram that's been the most high-profile threat to Nigeria's security, as well as to neighbouring countries. I spoke to our Africa regional editor, Will Ross, and asked him about the video.
This was a fairly short video clip in which a man is reading from a piece of paper in Arabic. Now, we believe this is Bakura Modu, also known as Sahlaba, and people are suggesting that this is now the new leader of Boko Haram following the death of Abubakar Shekau. In the clip, he urges his faction's commanders to stay loyal despite the loss of Abubakar Shekau, and he also says that Boko Haram commanders should reject the commander of the rival Islamic State West Africa province, or ISWAP, that's Abu Musab al-Barnawi. So in this clip, he's really calling for Boko Haram to remain strong at a time when they've clearly been under some pressure. And of course, it was last month that ISWAP's al-Barnawi said that Shekau had killed himself while on the run from ISWAP fighters following a clash between the two rival jihadist groups.
Will they manage, though, to remain strong? Like you say, this rallying cry by this new leader, what will it mean for the group?
Well, it's very difficult to predict. What is clear is that all of the jihadists operating in northeast Nigeria are causing a great deal of misery for the civilian population. This has been going on since 2009, but soon after the initial reports came out of Shekau's death, there were some suggestions of further fighting between the two groups as the Islamic State West Africa province group was trying to get Boko Haram commanders to switch sides, as it were, and join their ranks. So we'll have to see in the coming weeks how this plays out. I mean, some people hope that with the two sides fighting each other, it might benefit the Nigerian military. But what we're also seeing is the ISWAP group has been going after military targets and trying to win over the civilian population, which is something that certainly Shekau's faction didn't do. It was a very brutal group, has been a very brutal group, of course, responsible for the abduction of the Chibok schoolgirls and many, many attacks on civilians, unarmed civilians, whereas ISWAP seems to be trying to convince the civilian population that it's a force worth supporting, and that could be a problem for the Nigerian military.
The BBC's Will Ross. France has hosted a donor conference to try and help Lebanon's armed forces survive the country's increasingly dire economic crisis. The gathering included European states, the US, Russia and some Gulf Arab nations. Our Middle East analyst Alan Johnston reports.
All of Lebanon is suffering as the nation's economy collapses, and the army is no exception. Its chief told the donor conference that the situation was increasingly untenable. The slashing of the value of wages has forced some soldiers to seek extra jobs or leave the military altogether. Countries attending the conference were asked to help supply the army with food, fuel, medical supplies and equipment.
Alan Johnston. Still to come on the podcast.
Because it is saving my life, it's awesome having it.
We speak to a woman who's had a special heart-starting device fitted, just like the one the Danish footballer Christian Eriksen is going to have. An inquiry into an Islamist bomb attack and an Ariana Grande pop concert in the British city of Manchester 4 years ago has found that local security teams missed chances to stop it. The inquiry chairman, John Saunders, said the bomber, Salman Abedi, should have been identified as a threat and action taken. 22 people were killed and hundreds wounded when he blew himself up in the lobby of the arena. From Manchester, here's our correspondent, Nick Garnett.
It's 4 years since the Manchester Arena bomb, 9 months since the public inquiry began, and today, the first report, focusing on events before the explosion and the security arrangements in place around the Ariana Grande concert at which 22 people were murdered. The report highlights a litany of missed opportunities and catastrophic failures. Sir John Saunders is the chairman of the inquiry.
Everybody concerned with security at the arena should have been doing their job in the knowledge that a terrorist attack might occur on that night. They weren't. No one believed it could happen to them.
The report focuses its criticism on 3 organisations. The foyer of the arena came into the control of British Transport Police. There was a lack of leadership, and all 5 officers on duty failed to follow clear instructions on what was expected of them. One officer was supposed to be in the foyer at the beginning and end of the concert, in case they were needed. They were all in the train station next door. That failing meant there was no police officer on hand when a member of the public became suspicious of a man crouched in a corner with a rucksack on his back. He raised the alarm with a steward but told the inquiry he felt he was simply fobbed off. The arena's operator, SMG, is also singled out for criticism. Its risk assessment before the event was a box-ticking exercise, and the bomber was able to hide for 58 minutes in a blind spot not covered by CCTV. The training provided by the company that provided security, Showsec, was inadequate. Staff working for Showsec didn't do what they should have done. The organisations criticised say they will study the report's findings carefully. One of those who was killed in the attack was Martin Hett. His father, Paul Hett, voiced his despair at the catalogue of failures.
We were heartbroken to think Martin was simply in the wrong place at the wrong time. Today, our heartbreak turns to anger. We entrusted the safety of our loved ones into organisations and agencies who had a duty of care to protect them. This inquiry has rightly found that we were failed on every level.
Sir John Saunders' report highlighted the work of Martin's mother, Fegan Murray, who's campaigning for a new law which will require public places and venues to improve security. She's being helped by Nick Aldworth, who's a former counter-terrorism coordinator for the Metropolitan Police.
I think this is a generational opportunity. I can't think of another piece of legislation that will change the security landscape so significantly and, I hope, so dramatically.
The inquiry into the Manchester Arena bombing is continuing. 2 more reports on the role of the security services and the emergency services response will be published in due course.
That report by Nick Garnett. There were dramatic political developments in Northern Ireland.